Hey, Literacy Narrative Group, Ladau, Ayinga, Fatima, Demi, John, Claudia, Anna, Ramirez, Samantha, and Jonathan. So what I want to do today, or rather in this video, is read your um, analysis while recording so that you can take notes on what works and what doesn't work and apply it to your individual convention assignment that will be due at the end of next week and is actually the final assignment for this semester. So again, it's really important that you try to watch this whole video carefully and take notes so that some of the questions, if not all of the questions you have about the final assignment will be answered. So first I just want to talk about APA formatting overall. In an APA style paper, you want to have a header, and the header will, I don't know what this is, the header will be the title of your paper in caps. So it's underlined here because it's track changes, but for yours, you would just have it in caps, no underline. And you would have the page number here. And then you're right to have just the name as the heading. You don't need the date for APA. Having the title centered here is fine, but just make sure you have that header with the title as well. Okay, now let's begin reading. The literacy narratives analyzed are Who Am I Without Literacy by Joanna Schmertz, Teaching to Memorize or Understand by Avery Fields, and Title Works by Miracle Oaks. The discourse community analyzed is a form of creative fiction, nonfiction. These narratives explore the writer's relationship with reading and writing from an early age and how it helped to shape their identity. The narratives fit into the creative nonfiction genre and specifically fall into the category of docu-memoir. For example, they are written in the first person and dependent on concrete sensory details as a means of conveying their point. Moreover, these narratives include story conventions such as setting, plot, and characters, hence creating a climax and an ending. All right, so here's what works really well. You've identified, I want to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 conventions in a literacy narrative. And that's great because I think the most difficult part of a conventions report assignment is figuring out what conventions you actually want to talk about. So bravo on that. What needs work, though, is the way that you describe the discourse community. You say here that the discourse community is a form of creative nonfiction. In fact, discourse communities are groups of people. They're not genres. Here you've identified a genre. So in fact, what you want to think about is what group of people circulate literacy narratives. So one example would be the discourse community of English composition students. The genre of writing that they circulate is the literacy narrative. And then you're trying to say that the literacy narrative is a part of a larger genre called creative nonfiction. So just getting familiar with the terms. Again, discourse community is a group of people. The genre would be literacy narrative. And if you're trying to say that literacy narratives are a part of a larger genre, that's fine, but just make sure the language is clear on that. I also am not totally sure about starting with the titles of the literacy narratives. I think rather than do that, you could, because you're not analyzing just these literacy narratives, right? You're analyzing the form, the genre literacy narrative, and you're using these examples to talk more about the convention. So I would actually say that this should be rearranged, and that maybe you don't need to bring up the literacy narrative by name at all in the intro, and you could mention them when you use them for examples. Also, just a note, you only need to mention the last name. You don't italicized titles of small works like articles, you put them in quotes, and you would want the year right after the last name. So that's just like APA stuff. All right, now let's move on to the body paragraph. One primary convention of nonfiction writing is additional research on the topic. In nonfiction creative, the author embodies both public and private history while utilizing experience, memory, opinion, and observation in addition to other forms of research. In particular, a docu-memoir genre is a form of creative nonfiction based on interviews and audio taping ordinary people to understand their unusual life experiences. An example of this is found in the second literacy narrative we analyzed. Avery Fields writes, "My goal for the interview was to see where the students were on their understanding of literacy and how it impacted the way they studied when she interviewed ordinary students in order to obtain information for her assignment." Okay. So first, like grammatically, this sentence is way too long. Be mindful of ending sentences with periods, especially if you are using multiple quotes like Parnell, Fields. It just makes it easier for your reader to understand what it is you're talking about. And the other thing is, I really like that you identify the convention in your topic sentence. The fact that one important characteristic of the literacy narrative is that you need to do research. Just be consistent though. Are you going to be talking about nonfiction writing? Are you going to be talking about the docu-memoir? Are you going to be talking about the literacy narrative? If you start using too many terms, your reader will get confused. So if you start by talking about literacy narrative, why not continue throughout? I see that you are giving an example of how this person needed to collect research, but I was wondering if you might have been even more specific here, and instead of saying additional research, talked about one primary convention of nonfiction writing is collecting interviews and audio taping ordinary people, because that's really what your example is showing. So that's just a suggestion. And then the other thing that could have happened, but didn't happen here, is explaining why it's important to collect this kind of information. What does it add to the literacy narrative? Why is it important? Maybe even talk about the kind of language, like describing the language here. That would have been interesting. But in any case, this is a strong paragraph because you clearly identified the convention and you do give good examples of it from actual text. All right. Docu-memoir provides a deeper level of meaning for ordinary forms of speech and focuses on the reflections of ordinary people based on understanding of the docu-memoirist. Thus, research constitutes a vital element of creative nonfiction genre, as evidenced by docu-memoirs analyzed in this paper. There is a long-held misconception that creative nonfiction is dependent on memory and imagination to shape the narratives. While this kind of writing is based on real time, real place, and the real people, additional research is vital in enriching and cementing the narrative. Okay, so I'm not really sure what this paragraph is doing. It seems like it's repeating the idea about research. And it seems like here you're just describing what memoir is, but you're not really identifying a convention. So just a reminder that you do want to identify conventions. And so all of these things that you've listed here, first person, concrete sensory details, setting, plot, characters, climax, ending, those are things that should be developed into full paragraphs. So for example, you can say, in a body paragraph, every literacy narrative must have concrete sensory details. For example, in Oakes, whatever year, she describes her life as a student in this way, and then you give a quote and then you explain the details that are present within that quote. So we would want to work on that for your own individual assignments. You don't want to have paragraphs that are just sort of describing a genre without giving the conventions that are a part of the genre. Okay. Docu-memoirs embody the value of research in creative nonfiction writing. Additional research means gathering information from external sources to support and reinforce personal opinions or conclusions made within the narrative. Research can involve academic sources such as books or journal articles. In addition, it can include interviews with ordinary. Okay, so this is reading like it is a conclusion, which is fine. But I think so. The critique that I have here is that you're not really, you've identified one convention and you've described it fully, but you wanted to maybe think about doing that in more body paragraphs, specifically in your own assignment. Good job with the references. Just a heads up that your references must have a hanging indentation, which looks like that. All of these as well. So hopefully this was helpful. We'll be sending this your way alongside these annotated notes. You're now going to embark on the journey of completing your own convention assignment, and it'll be due next week. And after you've completed that assignment, you will officially be done with the course. So preemptive congratulations. I will speak to you soon.